Well, thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Catherine for the invitation to Maxwell and to the PARCC program. I'm very pleased to be here today. I will talk to you about some of the research I conducted recently. From the presentation that Kyle gave, I was really working more on political scientist stuff, elite transition, democratization, and now you can ask yourself, why is she working on social norms and violence against women? I think there is a relationship when we look at the foundations of authoritarianism in countries such as Morocco, understanding social norms, which found really behaviors, attitudes in a specific country could be helpful in understanding how these regimes could maintain their power. But I'm not going to speak about this part of the research, but rather to present the results of an experimental survey I conducted with a researcher and economist, Lina Zerhouni, in the framework of a partnership with Oxfam Morocco on violence against women and what is the role of social norms in maintaining or tolerating violence against women. So as you know, violence against women and girls is a serious violation of their human rights. It has detrimental effects on women and girls as well as on families, communities, and the state. When we look at Morocco compared to other Arab countries or countries in the Middle East and North Africa, this is one of the most advanced countries when it comes to laws concerning women's rights. And here I will present some of the laws we have reformed in order to guarantee more equal rights for women. And I will start with the 2004 New Family Code, which introduced a range of measures that enhance women's equality in marriage, divorce, and other aspects of family life. The penal, electoral, nationality, and criminal procedure codes were amended to ensure more rights to women and girls in Morocco. The different Moroccan constitutions since 1962 recognize equal rights for all citizens, which means that women since 1962, they had the right to vote and to run for office, like men. It was in the text, not in reality, but it was recognized since 1962. And with the 2011 constitution, which was adopted in the context of the Arab uprisings in Morocco, it established the authority for parity and the fight against all forms of discrimination. Last but not least, in 2018, finally, Morocco adopted a law on combating violence against women. So when we look at the legal framework, the constitutions and law, they are in favor of more equal rights for women. However, despite these measures, discrimination persists both at the level of laws and their implementation. So there is a gap between the adopted laws and the practice and the implementation of laws. Women still combine several forms of unequal access to education. We have more women, more illiterate women, specifically in rural areas. Training and employment, healthcare, and political and economic decision-making positions. Violence against women is widespread. And here I share with you the results of the first national survey on violence against women. It was conducted by the High Commissioner for Planning, the HCP, and it was conducted in 2009. Out of a population of 9.5 million women between 18 and 64 years old, almost 6 million, or 63%, have experienced some form of violence. So this is a huge number when it comes to violence. So looking at the facts, we have a context, we have laws, we have a liberalized political system, we have a legal framework which favors equal rights for men and women, but in reality we have a lot of discrimination and a lot of violence. So we wanted, through this study, to examine the drivers and contributing factors of violence against women in Morocco. We were very much interested in the role of social norms. During the past 2 decades, there was a lot of interest, including in the international literature, on the role of social norms in situations of violence against women. But in Morocco, there was no study looking at what is the impact of social norms when we speak about norms, about violence against women. But the study was also about the role of institutional norms. We cannot examine violence against women in Morocco without looking at the established institutional framework and how it influences situations of violence. Social norms by themselves could contribute, and this is what we've learned from the literature, which analyzed the link. Normally, the ecological model developed by Laurie Hayes, the ecological framework, which distinguished different factors which influence violence against women, and how she insists that all these factors, she emphasizes all the factors, and she emphasizes the interaction between all these factors in producing or situations of violence against women. And among these factors are social norms. So looking at the model and how socioeconomic determinants, how the environment, how other factors such as poverty, alcoholism could influence situations of violence, we have revised our research, and we decided to include also institutional norms. Today, I will not be speaking about institutional norms, but I will focus mainly on the role of social norms. In developing countries, particularly Arab and Muslim, authors explain violence against women by the conspiracy of silence. And here I refer to the work by Saïda Douki in 2003, who, for her, there is a resistance to recognize violence against women by institutions such as the police, the justice system, health, the staff in the health, in the hospitals, etc. So whenever there is a woman who was beaten by her husband and she will go to the police, they will just tell her, go back to your home. Like, this is really accepted. So, and she described the situation as a conspiracy of silence, which means different institutions are not recognizing that women are subject to violence, especially domestic violence. Societal, and they speak also about societal resistance, which is founded in social norms fostered by religious references or their interpretations. As you know, in Muslim society, there are different readings of Islam, of the role of women, according to different currents. Patriarchal culture, which is, I think, very more common when we try to understand violence against women in different countries, globally, not only in Arab and Muslim countries. Family, honor, and the anticipation of the social section. So before speaking a bit about the methodology and what we did as a research, I would like to define first what do we mean by social norm, very quickly. So it's a very broad concept. Intuitively, the social norm refers to the perceptions and representations of what would be normal or abnormal in a group. They would correspond to the unspoken rules that determine acceptable behavior within a group. And in other words, social norms reflect individuals' beliefs about what are typical behaviors within a reference group and what members of the reference group approve or disapprove. For Durkheim, social norms are supposed to guarantee the social band. They would be the manifestation of restrictive values revealed by the social consequences of the violence. Thus, what are the proscribed or non-proscribed attitudes within group are delimited by negative or positive social sanctions. We comply to the group. We do like the group because we are afraid of social sanctions. The anticipation of these social sanctions would force to conform to the collective behavior. When it comes to the concept of violence, because these are the two main concepts we were working with in our research, it's also a very complex, multidimensional concept, and there is no universally recognized definition. Both international organizations and legislators in different countries adopt a variety of definitions. For this research, we have opted for the definition advanced by the United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And of course, we used also the definition by the law I told you about, the law which was adopted in Morocco in 2018 on combating violence against women, which defines violence against women as any act, physical or moral, or abstention based on discrimination on grounds of sex, which results in bodily or psychological, sexual, or economic harm to women. And I have to say here that in the law, conjugal rape among a couple, is not criminalized. So this is the definition, but they don't put as a form of violence rape when it happens between a married couple. So to understand the role of social norms in situations of violence, the empirical approach adopted was based on the analysis of the following: the perceptions and attitudes of young women and men towards patterns of behavior that symbolize different forms of violence, be it psychological, verbal, physical, economic, sexual, or institutional, and that women may experience in different settings of life. It could be the domestic sphere, it could be the public space, it could be work. So we presented to the interviewees, to the people we interviewed, different situations with different forms of violence in different spaces. We were very much interested in the degree of tolerance or of acceptance or not of violent attitudes towards women, and what was the logic behind it. We were not just interested, yes, I agree with this attitude or not, but we were very much interested in the justification. How do interviewees explain their attitude vis-a-vis whatever situation they were presented with? These explanations provided information on young people's frames of reference. So what we did, it was for almost a year, we organized workshops with civil society actors active in the field of women's rights, or they were active in the field of violence against women, or what we call les mères célibataires, that is the unmarried mères célibataires, single mothers. So they were involved in this kind of issues, and we organized workshops in different cities, and the cities you see here, these are the cities that were targeted in the study: Casablanca, Rabat, Oujda, Larache, and Agadir. And if you have questions about why these cities, I can give more information during the discussion. We conducted a qualitative survey based on in-depth, semi-structured interviews with young women and men aged between 18 and 35 years old, actors and or victims of various forms of violence. We had 28 interviews in the 5 cities. Then I put experimental survey, perhaps it's quasi-experimental, experimental survey in the 5 targeted cities. So we had a sample of 14 young participants aged between 18 and 35 and almost half-half. And that was a criteria we put deliberately in the choice of participants in the survey. The interviewees were confronted with scenarios describing different situations of violence that vary according to whether they are in the public or private sphere. So the survey, it's experimental. We did not tell them that it was about violence. You know, if I go and ask a young Moroccan man, I'm conducting a research on violence against women, it will create a bias. So we didn't say that it was about violence, but rather it was about social relations in Morocco and how they have evolved during the past decades. So people were open to speak about these issues. The interviewees were subject to conditioning or treatment, if I want to use the terms of experimental research, which took the form of questions likely to encourage them to think about a set of values or issues related to religion, tradition, or laws and institutions. So we had like 4 types of questionnaires, one with the traditional conditioning, one with the religious conditioning, one the institutional, and one control group. Like there was no questions to influence a bit or to condition the interviewees. Our sample, the sample was distributed among the 5 cities according to the weight of the population, of the young population within each city. Because we had many young people between 20 and 34 years old in Casablanca, we had 60% of the interviewees who were in Casablanca. Because of this is how we did it, how we distributed according to the weight of the young population within the total of the 5 cities. So the sample by age, we distinguish between 24, 25, 29, and 30, 35. Of course, somebody who is between 18 and 24 doesn't have the same attitudes and perceptions as someone who is 30, 35. So we distinguish among the big age group, and we had the majority, like 43%, among the first category, followed by 25 to 29%. In terms of level of education, the majority of the participants had a higher education level or baccalaureate. This is when they finish their high school, we call it baccalaureate. So they had either baccalaureate or higher education, which means that the surveyed population was really educated. Among urban educated youth. They were also 67% single because they were still young. So the majority of them were not married yet. We developed a socioeconomic indicator. This is a really tough thing to do if you want to know how the social status influences behaviors and attitudes. So we used an average of variables such as the type of housing, house, apartment, rental or property, the services available in the neighborhood of residence, education of parents, etc. And the average, we created this socioeconomic indicator, and we had 3 categories. Weak means poor, average, middle class, but middle class according to the Moroccan criteria of middle class, like they are not very rich, like they are not really middle class if we look at their conditions, and then high upper middle class. And now I would like to share with you the results mainly about domestic violence and the vignette that we use to understand domestic violence and how social norms might influence or favor or encourage or inhibit domestic violence in Morocco. There is a book by Maswi in 2017. It was based also on interviews and mainly on qualitative research. And one of her main conclusions was that domestic violence persists in Morocco and is also subject to social tolerance. According now to the survey I mentioned earlier, which was conducted in 2009, 3.7 million of women were subject to domestic violence. The number I gave earlier was about violence in general, but when it comes to domestic violence, it's 3.7 million of women. It was during the 12-month preceding the survey, and 55% of the female population aged 18-64. This is 55% of the total population of female population in Morocco. The survey shows that this violence was rooted in the social norms and social structural inequalities that exist between women and men. Now the results, I will give a brief presentation of the main results before going to the details, to how the interviewees answered the questions. The results of our study show that some dynamics within the couple involve a dominant-dominated relationship between the men and the women, and others do not. The material we collected showed that there is a certain ambivalence in respondents' perceptions and attitudes about patterns of behavior that symbolize forms of violence against women. So on the one hand, the authority of men over women is widely accepted by young people interviewed. This is clear from the degree of tolerance of the attitude of a husband that controls the freedom to dress of his wife. That was the first vignette. Or that of a husband who controls the freedom of going out of the household of his wife. That was vignette 3. These controls aim at dominating women and depriving them of their liberty are justified by beliefs strongly rooted in a patriarchal culture. In Moroccan society, it is widely accepted that for a woman, before leaving the household, she has to ask permission from her husband. On the other hand, so there was no coherence in the results. On the other hand, the results of the study show that male domination has less influence in the conjugal sexual sphere. So when it comes to sexual relations in the couple, it was not accepted that a man has authority or could force his wife, the wife, only the couple, not outside the outside of marriage. Sexual violence within the couple is not tolerated by the majority of respondents. They justify their attitudes by referring to traditional or religious values as well as those of human rights and freedoms. So the reference, the framework, like how they were justifying, it was in all of these things: tradition, religion, human rights. The reference to these two registers reflects, on the one hand, the importance still given by the young people interviewed to traditions and religion in order to justify their attitudes and behavior. On the other hand, it shows the composite nature of the value system of the young people in Morocco. It is very composite. Persistence of traditional and religious values and the emergence of the values of equality, gender equality among respondents. So here again, we found other statistics when it comes to freedom to dress in the National Survey on Violence Against Women, and it's 13% of women do not enjoy the freedom to dress as they would have liked. The limits to personal freedom are felt and experienced as violence by women. And in addition, the survey report shows that clothing type is a risk factor for physical violence against women in the public space, which means that if you are wearing here a jilaba, this is the traditional clothing in Morocco, which is large and tall. It covers the body of the woman. There is less risk if you are wearing modern style short dress or tight jeans to be harassed in the public space. So they were showing, the survey showed that. Our study, I will go back to the first vignette and I will present the results, because for me it's important to look also at what were the motives given by the interviewees to one vignette, because we don't have a lot of time, so I will focus only on this vignette. So we asked them, and here I'm really doing a lot of translation work because it was in dialect, Moroccan dialect, close to Arabic, then to French, and now I'm doing translation to English. So I put French and English. So we asked the respondents whether they agreed, partly agreed, disagreed, or strongly disagreed with Karim. It's a first name, Moroccan first name for a man, who forced his wife Naima, dressed in jeans and t-shirt, change her clothes, before going out together to a coffee shop.
To more conservative clothes?
Just to change. We were not specific. Okay. We just said, and we didn't say anything about the jeans and the t-shirt. Right. Like tight or not tight, we didn't say anything. For us, just like modern, this is what many young people how they dress, jeans and t-shirts. So, what do you think? Do people, the young people?
Oh, you have here.
Sorry. Oh, So 78%, they do agree with the husband's attitude of the young people. It was quite a surprise. These opinions were shared more by men than women, but look, not a huge difference. It's also by women, 47% of women in the group of respondents who agreed with the husband attitude, which means the 78%, and shared more by women than men in the group of respondents who disagreed with Karim's attitude, like the 22%. So there was a gender here difference. Socio-demographic characteristics of the respondents and level of education also, I think, played a role. So when it comes to education, this is higher. This is baccalaureate, mid-school, high school, and elementary school. And the gray is they don't agree, and the yellow is that they agree. And you see, the higher the education, the highest is the rate of people who do not agree with Karim's attitude. And the highest, the lowest, the level of education, the highest is the level of those who agreed with Karim's attitude, which means that the more educated they are, the less they had this kind of attitude or compliance with this kind of attitudes. And when it comes to the social level, we have also, this is rich, middle class, weak. And again, the gray is they don't agree, and you can see here 42% with belonging to the highest, having a higher social status, do not necessarily agree. And again, the weaker the social level is, the highest is the degree of agreement or with the attitude of Karim. So the motives of the respondents, we were really interested on. So gender plays a role. There is a difference by gender. There is a difference by level of education and by social level. And we wanted to learn about their motivations. And here, is there anyone who knows French? Droit de l'homme ne veut pas dire human rights. But droit de l'homme veut dire the man has authority over his wife. It's the right for the man, because in French it has the same meaning as it's a human right, droit de l'homme. But that was not the meaning. The meaning was that the man has the right over his woman, like the man has authority over his wife. And this is the explanation that was put forward by 45% among those who agreed with Karim's attitude. It was followed by respect for social rules and the gaze of society, and here we speak about social norms. And also the man authority over wife, it's also a social norm. The woman's duty of obedience. And the women, we have here 6% who were telling us the woman should consult her husband, including for things related to how she will dress. It's a subject of consultation among the couple. So for those who say the man has authority over his wife, that was some of the answers that were given by them. The manner in which the wife dresses is considered as one of the responsibilities of the man towards his wife, with sometimes an explicit reference to the responsibility of the husband for the sins of his wife. Like it's religiously based. Like if he doesn't tell her how to dress, if she goes like that to the public sphere, he will be punished by God, not her. The attitude of the husband was justified also by speaking about jealousy or man's fear for his masculinity. We say it in Arabic, ar-rujula, which means like he is the man, he is the tough man. And if he goes like that with his wife to the public space, to a coffee shop, everybody will look at him like it's not good for his masculinity. The direct references to religion were relatively small. They didn't speak really religion, 8%. And for us, it was not easy to establish a link between religion and this kind of motivations advanced by the respondents. because there were no questions in the survey about the degree of religiosity of the participants. And I think it's really difficult to make any linkages to know what is the degree of religiosity of a person, even when we ask these kind of questions. The second category was respect for social rules and the gaze of society. Well, that was the explanation of 27% of respondents. And this group evokes various motives such as we live in a conservative and or Muslim society. For them, a woman should not dress like this in a conservative and women society. So it was because of society, not because of them. The woman must cover herself. There is this concept of sitra, out of respect for her husband and for society. And they were also speaking about the status of a married woman. A married woman should not wear blue jeans and a t-shirt and go to a coffee shop. So there is a style of clothing more modest, which is imposed which a married woman should wear. The other motive was the body of a woman is naked, and naked, the hawra, in the sense it's in Islam, when you do not wear hijab or you don't cover in a way or another, it's called hawra, like all the body is naked. Even if you're dressing, it doesn't mean that you're naked really, but if you're not wearing the hijab or you're not covering, it's naked. These comments were made by men, 64% more by men than by women. When it comes to the duty, women's duty of obedience, it was mentioned by 21% of respondents. And this obedience was justified by please the husband, respect his will, has to have the blessing or rida of the husband, and or the fact that the woman should do whatever the husband is asking her to do. For a minority, the woman must obey her husband. It was really a practical thing to avoid problems or with him or to avoid problems in the streets, because there is a lot of harassment in the public space. So if she goes with him like that, other men might look at her and the husband might start fighting because another man is looking at his wife. So it was just a practical thing. It doesn't have to do with religion or society, but really just to avoid problems. These views were more expressed by women than by men. All these notions corroborate the domination of men over women in the context of a marriage relationship and show that the great majority of young people are attached to social norms depriving women of their freedom. In Morocco, the internalization of gender roles is done through different socializing institutions such as the family, schools, media, peer group, etc. And it contributes to the learning of social roles operating according to cultural logics that divide the social world into one feminine and one masculine, and each one has to play a role within society. Now I would like to speak about the 22% who were critical, because we have to be hopeful for the young in Morocco. 22% were critical about Karim's attitude, and 56% they think that it's a personal freedom. They were speaking about it's part of a personal freedom of the wife. And 44% they were speaking about consultation. That when it comes again to clothing, they don't agree, but there should be some kind of consultation between the two. The reference to the concept of a woman's personal freedom was highlighted by those, and these are some of the justification. The woman is free and has the right to dress as she wishes. The woman is not the property of her husband. The dress worn by the woman was normal for many respondents. Like in this group, they think, well, it's normal. What's wrong with the t-shirt and the blue jean? In this group, there are more women who believe in the values of freedom and equality, and the majority who have a level of education equivalent to or above the bachelor's degree. So education, again, contributes to framing how we see certain things within society. The importance of consultation in the couple, it was 44%, and the motives of this group were: the man cannot impose on his wife how to dress. It requires trust in the couple. For them, like how she dresses, he has to trust her, even in the public sphere. The couple must agree on these things before the wedding. Like the consultation, not after the wedding, but these are things they have to discuss before. Of course, there are almost as many men as women, with the predominance of those with bachelor's degree or a higher education level. To conclude, the results of the vignette show that a majority of men and women invoke patriarchal values in their rationalization, explanation of violence against women. They use the socio-cultural context to give some legitimacy to their position and emphasize the importance of the rules of society and religion. These religious values are sure values that reassure. This explains the fact that religion has power over individuals and groups, and that it becomes, in conflict situations, an instrument that legitimizes ideas, actions, and practices. A minority of respondents believe in the importance of dialogue in the couple and in the freedom of the woman. And our results confirm Bourqia's, it's a well-known sociology thesis on the hybridity of the youth value system and the competition that exists between patriarchal and liberal values in Morocco. Moroccan society has undergone profound changes during the last 5 decades. Both the values of patriarchal order and the values of human rights contribute to the formation and the opinions and attitudes of women. And our study confirms the ambivalence that characterizes the value system of the youth today. Like different surveys were conducted before, and our study shows that there is continuity in this system, and it shows that social norms or the values that underpin them do not constitute coherent sets. We were trying to analyze if there was a group who was really consistent in his reference either to tradition, religion, or patriarchy. There was no group. Sometimes they will refer to tradition, and in other situations they will say, no, it's about human rights and freedom. We cannot do that. So there was no coherence in the answers or responses of the participants to the interview. So there is really some ambivalence there. And this is also social gender relations reveal the hybridity of values as well as the socio-political dimension in which violence against women occur. And here I refer to family, to school, and all the values we transmit to the people, to the young people in Morocco through these socializing institutions. Thus, it is necessary to go beyond a strictly causal reading between norms and violence to question the whole political culture and the socio-economic conditions of the context of this violence. And I thank you for your attention.